Coming in from the green room is Dr. Michael Lim, cardiologist with SLU Care and SSM SLU Hospital. He's got his makeup on. He's getting his microphone on. Good morning. Good morning, doctor.
Good morning.
First, let's start with your Michigan Wolverines, ranked second in the country.
Second in the country, but we got a big game this week against Michigan State.
Ooh, Michigan State. Michigan State's not doing that well this year.
We haven't beaten them more than once out of the last 8 years, and so I don't really care how they're doing. I want to beat them.
All right. All right. Boy, there's some recessed anger in there somewhere. Dr. Michael Lim, you found a study that says that football, while being a whole lot of fun to follow, is not a very safe game.
Well, the recent study, I think, is good in the sense that we're continuing to learn more and more about this concussion thing. Mm-hmm. And, I think, this concept that concussions occur in football is a known concept now.
Right.
But the ability to understand concussions is really hard. All of the advanced imaging, whether we do fancy MRI scans, CAT scans, anything like that, it actually doesn't tell you what's going on inside the brain, and it isn't really part of what a concussion is.
Right. So concussions, we think about it in the NFL. They have all this concussion protocol. But what about, Pop Warner and the little leagues and the kids out there and the high school kids and the junior high kids who are playing football?
Yeah, so a couple things. One is very scary, and that is, the frontal lobes of the brain continue to develop probably up until age 25 in most people. And so we believe that kids who have concussions before that age, they're affected much greater and potentially have a much longer impact. And this new study actually showed that there were frequent concussions and frequent heavy hits in football in younger kids, in high school and ages below. So the issue with respect to, this is just the really biggest of the big boys running at the highest of speeds and colliding with each other and only happening in the NFL, I think that's probably untrue.
What about the massive hits versus the smaller hits?
Yeah, so I think that's another misconception. So we think about things in terms of the major collision, and the higher the impact of two people really going at each other head to head, that's what causes a concussion. A concussion, can be caused by a direct blow. But it also can be caused by anything that has the head have a sudden change in direction. So anything that causes the head to swivel rapidly, and even more important, sometimes a deceleration blow. And so not necessarily direct impact, but something that causes the head to whip back and forth. The brain is bathed in some fluid, and there's not a lot of space in there. And when you knock it around by the deceleration forces, you actually can cause more trauma and potentially more damage to it.
I often see, driving down the street, you see a water truck with a big, giant sort of plastic tank of water. And the tank is secured on the truck, but the water is jiggling all around. And every time I see that, I think that's your brain inside a football helmet.
That's probably an exaggeration of your brain inside of a football helmet because there's a lot less fluid in there, but it's a decent way to think about it in terms of, the brain, it stays in motion, and just because the body stops abruptly, the brain is just going to continue to move forward. And then it'll stop. And so it's the move forward and then deceleration part that sometimes causes a problem, or the translational forces when the head rotates rapidly and it starts to spin, and that actually can cause shearing forces within the brain. All of these cause damage. All of these cause concussions. Remember that concussions are principally hallmarked by severe headaches and dizziness. Most of them aren't necessarily accompanied by kids or even adults blacking out.
So,
and some of them, they don't even know, the person who had it don't even know that they really had it. And then it's after the fact that they have these severe headaches and a lot of dizziness and imbalance.
what do you tell parents then whose children, are obsessed with football and love football?
That's the whole trouble, isn't it, Kelly? Because we would love to, just like in most of medicine, we would love to put forward, here's our top 5 things, and if you do these things, you can prevent it. Right, you can prevent getting this disease. You can prevent a concussion, and it turns out that football is the most prominent sport where you can get a concussion for a high school boy. Soccer is the most prominent sport where you can get a concussion for a high school girl. And actually, girls have significantly greater symptoms that take a significantly longer time to resolve than boys do. And there's thought that girls are way more susceptible to getting concussions than boys. I think the issues have to be focused on paying attention to how your kid's doing. And it's very, very, very hard, if not impossible, to prevent a concussion. But if they have one, it has to get recognized. And if they're having severe headaches, if they're having mood changes, if they're having dizziness, or they're sleeping too much, or which is hard to figure out in a high schooler, but if they're quote unquote sleeping too much, then those things I think have to at least raise the question, or at least raise a level of concern, no matter what sport they play. Because right behind soccer is wrestling and lacrosse. And so there's almost no sport that you could actually play that potentially is devoid of the risk of concussion.
Your point that a concussion is bad and it comes with all those issues, but when you play and you have a concussion, that's really bad.
It's really bad because you number one, your faculties with respect to your ability to stay balanced, your ability to put yourself in the right position and understand what's going on and potentially protect yourself, are no longer at their highest functioning capabilities. And so this whole, it's actually a term now, concussion protocol. It really means nothing except for a neurologist comes to the sideline and evaluates a player for a concussion. And
Right.
if there's any suspicion that a player has a concussion, they take away their helmet and they're not allowed to go back in the game. Okay, that's very important.
Right.
Now, the other scary part is once somebody who's had a concussion, they're at least twice as likely to have another one. And so it seems to be the unfortunate gift that keeps on giving. So again, the problem is we have very, very, very little information. The most definitive information we have is this CTE stuff, which is only determined based on autopsy specimens of the brain.
Right.
I think most of us really aren't interested in submitting ourselves for that at this moment in time. We'd like to wait for a little while.
Well, but people talk, wimps and rub a little dirt on it. But when you have people like Mike Ditka and Kurt Warner saying they don't want their kids playing football,
Yep.
that's something to stand up and take notice of.
Well, the other thing that Ditka has said and others have said is we need to change the game. So take away the helmets.
Right.
There's no doubt that people are bigger and faster in today's generation than they have been in the past when Ditka played. There's no way to, I think, get rid of all of concussions, but I think if you change the way the game is played so that you can't just keep doing the same things that resulted in concussion. And so you have to take away some padding, you have to take away some of the helmets or something,
right.
So that the force that people knock themselves into each other or the speed at which they fly around on the field goes away.
Well, do you remember the football player Refrigerator Perry?
I do.
He weighed 300 pounds and was considered...
Yeah, he was huge.
He was huge. Now, the average offensive lineman averages 330 pounds.
They do. And
so,
they
need to have a weight limit immediately, right? Put in a weight limit or something. Put in a 300-pound weight limit.
The number one college football recruit in the country last year from New Jersey, he's playing for Michigan this year as a freshman. He's just under 300 pounds.
Yeah.
He's a defensive lineman. But he runs about a 4.5 something 40. He can go from sideline to sideline at crazy speed. He chases down quarterbacks, and so you have that much size and that much mass moving at that much speed. The collisions are going to be horrendous.
Dr. Michael Lim, great stuff. Cardiologist with SLU Care and SSM Health SLU Hospital. Doctor, thanks for coming in.
Have a great day, guys.
You got it. 8:29. Big